All right. Good morning, Mr. Wellman. How are you?
Doing well this morning.
Good. Well, we're here for episode 2 of the Calotype Chronicles, and we're going to go on a little journey here in a moment to discuss Alexander Greenlaw, some of the background about him prior to, like, how did he get to India? How did he become a Calotype? Why did he choose a Calotype paper negative over at the timeline we're talking about, 1855, 1856? Why didn't he use wet plate? What are some of these things? So we have some clues. There are a couple of books written by several different scholars that really help kind of tie this together, and I'm going to mention those as we go through it. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here, and I'll pull this over, and then we'll get this thing started, and we'll just kind of go through it step by step. And I will mention, as I'm getting ready to pull this up, let me just pull this up here real quick. I'll share the screen, and I'm going to share that screen. And we should be good. I think I see us there. I'm going to look over my other monitor, Michael, but you and I should be on the left. All right, so I'm looking straight ahead. So Calotype Chronicles, episode 2, November 7th, 2024. I'm Tim Layton, the host, and I've got Michael Wellman here. Hey, Michael, I didn't kind of prep you for this, but would you share with the folks here a little bit of your background as a large and ultra large format photographer? Yeah, I know I did. I'm kind of hitting you.
Well, probably like most people of my age, I started in high school. I've always been fascinated with cameras, and when I got on the paper, I got a chance to be a photographer.
Yeah.
And that just lit my interest, because then I was developing and printing that I learned on my own.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went to a camera club, and that was very educational. And from there, I went from 35 millimeter to large format, just because I was fascinated by what I was seeing. And I remember somebody had an 8x10, and he said, "You don't want to look on that." Of course, when someone tells you don't want to look, you got to look.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And the reason he said you don't want to look is because when you see something on an 8x10 or ultra large format camera, that ground glass is just so inviting. So then I had to have an 8x10.
Of course you did. What else could you have done?
And then once I got an 8x10, I didn't have an enlarger, so everything was being contact printed. And that's when I discovered Michael Smith and became an Azo and Emidal follower of his.
Yeah.
And then because he has an 8x20, I ended up getting an 8x20.
Yeah.
And I kind of did that for a while. And then 2012, I wasn't using my equipment all that much. And I thought, okay, the world's going digital, the film's going to be dead. And I sold everything.
Wow.
And did digital for 4 or 5 years. And you don't even need a hand to print how many pictures I printed digitally. I took thousands and thousands of images.
Yeah.
And I realized I wasn't having fun. And this is the reason why I do this. I do this to have fun. It's not my living. It's never been my living. And so I slowly came back to now, to the point where I'm shooting mainly 8x10 and 14x17 and 8x20. And my love is for contact printing, because I still believe that is the ultimate print. And in the last few years, I've gotten more into, especially with the loss of silver paper, I've gotten more interested in the alternative techniques. And now Tim has taken me down this other rabbit hole,
Yeah.
which I'm excited. This is really interesting stuff here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. One of the things that I just realized in this exact moment, even though I knew these facts, at any point in time, we might have different formats, but at this point in time, we're shooting the exact same formats: 8x10, 8x20, and 14x17.
Yeah,
So we're really aligned on formats for sure.
that's
Uh,
true.
yeah, yeah, it's funny. I didn't even think about that till I heard you talking about it. No, I think it's important for just our peers and people that are interested to understand. I mean, you've been doing this a really long time, right?
Yeah, 50 plus years.
Yeah. And, I think the message here is that I've been involved in photography since I've been basically 11 years old, and that's been 50 years, right? And I built my first darkroom, started with medium format, immediately went to large format after maybe just a couple years. I'm still a teenager. And so I've been at this a long time. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that I really started going deep on the calotypes. It just seemed like a journey too far, right? It's like, it just seemed like, man, I've always had this bug down in my belly that I wanted. I guess I should back up and say my vision has always leaned into the pictorialist. I should probably state that first. And it's more about mood and feeling and emotion rather than it is like, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with ultra sharp like F64 type stuff. And we saw those movements in analog photography, and we certainly seen it in digital photography. And now we have digital photographers buying software to make their images soft. So the world goes around. But
Yeah.
for me personally, my personal work, which is expressive, driven by an artist statement, driven by a narrative, driven by the desire to share the work, not necessarily sell the work. I do have like a print club and I do sell prints, but that's not my driving force. It's really, for me, and if I'm being honest, it's really more almost about personal therapy, right? It's like
Yeah.
a way, it's just a way to relax and enjoy life. And I deeply enjoy it. Just like we share that same sort of feeling, right? So anyway, that's how I got into calotypes. Is I just once I went down the path, and it was just such failure after failure after failure, right? And there just wasn't really any great information, at least I should say contemporary information. And so that led me down a path of going back to the original 19th century documentation. We know that some of that information was intentionally deceptive. We know that even in the time of Fox Talbot's time, back in the late 1830s, and we ultimately patented in 1841 because of Daguerre went to market and he about lost his mind, around that. And that's well documented. I know that's kind of funny, like a broad brushstroke, but I do believe that's true. I mean, he literally lost his mind. And, when he published the patent for the calotype, I have seen the patent, and it's very broad. You certainly, I don't think many people today could produce a calotype based on that patent, much less. And we have 175 years, 180 years, whatever it is, of history behind us. Even today in 2024, if you want to make a calotype, you need to go to somebody like me that there's others too, but somebody like me that has done the hard work. You put in the hours, you put in the years, you put in the cycles, you've failed miserably, and you've figured it out along the way, right? And so that probably sets the tone for how difficult that can be. Now, what's interesting is I'm on the other side of it, where I'm producing several bodies of work with the calotypes. I absolutely love them. I have a commanding understanding of the chemistry and the process and the workflow. And I think, Michael, you even commented on recent, I think it was my first episode, you said, you make this sound so easy. Right. And
Yeah.
it's true. It's like anything, right? Once you know, it is easy.
Yeah.
Right. And so um, those of you that are out there listening, make sure you join these shows. Make sure you join the subscribe here on the YouTube channel, as well as the website at timlaytonfineart.com. Michael, as you know, I write a lot of articles there that never show up on YouTube, and there's a lot of valuable content there, right? Both
Wonderful articles.
yeah, a lot of educational stuff. There's a lot of creative things and things. So you're never going to see those if you only subscribe on YouTube. And if you want to go deeper, you want like these show notes, all my research, you want all the technical stuff about calotypes, then just become a premium subscriber to the Darkroom Diary. It's only $10 a month, for crying out loud. I mean, you waste more money on coffee and soda or whatever, and you'll get access to everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, to include me, right?
Yeah.
And
I want to interject something here that you just mentioned, but it's, I think, an important part in what distinguishes you from 99% of the people out there on YouTube, in that you do a lot of technical stuff, and it's fantastic.
yeah,
But you also delve into the creative aspect of photography, and to me, that is more important
yeah,
than the technical. The technical, yeah, you got to have that to get started. But after that, what do you do?
yeah.
And your recent articles on the impressionists and the
Oh, yeah.
photographers, the painters, Vincent van Gogh, they
Yeah.
were wonderful, and they give you a glimpse, because too often we don't think about that part of photography.
Yeah.
It's key to making good images, instead of just making Xerox copies of what's in front of you.
Yeah, right. No, I really appreciate that. Thank you for that, for recognizing that. And, even with like the stuff that's outside of our swim lane as photographers, like on the painting side, you see how I tie it back to photography. How can we leverage or use or potentially think about or frame that, right? And so, yeah, I try and do that, and I'm very, as you know, open and transparent. I show you my flub ups, my failures. Sometimes, a lot of times when I do the videos, I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. And whatever happens, I just record it and I share it with you guys. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, right? And so anyway.
But that's life in the darkroom.
Yeah, well, it's true. And I think that's really kind of fundamentally what I'm trying to do, Michael, with the YouTube channel. Look, it's not about views for me. It's not about the $10 a month. I could honestly really kind of care less, right? But I think it's more of a respectful thing. It's like I'm giving you tremendously valuable content, and I open myself up to answering any kind of creative or technical questions. And it's just more of like a stopgate, I guess. Like if you can't contribute $10 a month, then should I really, opine and give you my undivided attention? I don't know. You know what I mean? So maybe that's my business background or something. I don't know. But it's just kind of hard for me to take people serious if they can't, if they don't want to be serious themselves, right? So yeah. So anyway, calotypes, how I got here has always been this underlying love of the pictorial aesthetic. I just think about the body of work, how it's evolved. I read. I research. I've been doing it my whole life on this stuff. And finally, after decades of, I've done everything that you can imagine. I don't know that I've done 100%, because I think that would be silly to say that, but I bet I've done 90% of all the historic 19th century processes, all the ones that you would expect, and then some you probably never even heard of. And some of them got close, but there was always just something. And then the magic of the calotype bug got me, right? It was everything that I wanted. And now I'm working through the struggles of bending it to, working in the field and Actually, I shared with you even, I think it was this morning, Michael, when we were talking prior to the show here, that I'm working on testing the boundaries, right, of
Yeah.
how long we can get that potassium nitrate byproduct out of the sensitized paper, and then how far can we go. And so I'm testing those boundaries, and I share all that stuff too. So anyway, let's get into this. Let's take and learn more about Greenlaw. So here's the trajectory for the next couple episodes. So we're going to learn some context, how Greenlaw got to India today, in 1850s, and we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to kind of lean into a little bit of his life and that. And then on the next episode, Mike Ware wrote an article. Both of these, and I'll show you the book here in a moment, came out of that particular book. So when I share the screen and we get to that part, if you want that book, I will put the link to Amazon or I think the publisher website where you can go get the book. I'd highly recommend it because their reproduction of the prints of not only the prints but the calotypes, Greenlaw and others, by the way, calotypes are just absolutely incredible, and it gives you like the closest sense that you can to just see just his calotypes. They're unbelievably dense. I mean, I've read in history in so many different sources that literally you could stand on them. You could stack bricks on them. It's just like they are not joking. And the color is fascinating. And I don't know if it's attributed to some of the time. And there's just so much to dig into. So anyway, I'll mention that book and get that. And then in Ware's chapter in the book, he really does a real nice job of connecting some dots with some of the chemistry. And then we just go over at a high level of Greenlaw's workflow. And then on the next episode, what I'm going to do is take Greenlaw's words himself from the 1869 Photographic News edition. I think it was the January edition. And we're going to dig into his actual workflow and his notes and the chemistry. And Michael, as you know, I know that chemistry inside and out. And I'm going to provide you a session that's probably going to be like an hour and a half or 2 hour session. But I'm going to go through that chemistry with a fine-tooth comb. I'm going to explain to you in detail what the chemistry is doing, why it's doing it, what can you do if you want to modify or tweak some variables to suit your particular needs and stuff. So we're going to go super, super deep. Post that episode, you would have literally everything you need to make calotypes. What you'll be missing is the experience and all the mistakes and things like that. And I will opine during that episode when we get into the actual workflow part. I will opine and interject all the helpful tips that I have gleaned over the last few years that I think will really, really help a beginning practitioner to explore this. So we'll get into that, and that's what we're doing. We know what we do here in the Calotype Chronicles. We look at the chemistry, we look at the history, we look at the workflows, we look at the individual people like Greenlaw that we're going to look at today. We look at these pioneers and we get into it. And some of it's technical, some of it, like today, this isn't technical at all today. This is just more of the life and the story of Greenlaw. And I think that's incredibly important. Like, for me, I've been bitten by the calotype bug, right? And so the more I know about the history, I look at the work that was done, I look at the examples, I look at the pioneers in this space, it just makes me a better photographer, I think. And right. And so having that context just really helps me in so many ways. So you can always connect with me at timlaytonfineart.com. You can email me directly. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect there. I mostly connect with like galleries and curators and other photographers too and stuff like that. You can connect with me on YouTube at the Tim Layton Darkroom Diary and things. Those are all the places you can find me. So we kind of went over the introductions and the welcome piece here. I'm going to give you a 30-second elevator pitch of just kind of setting the tone for what is the Calotype paper negative process. I'm going to summarize, and we'll continue to come back to this summary of the Calotype innovations many times because it doesn't apply so much today, but it certainly will in the episode 3 when we go through Mike Ware's, I guess, research and academic, scholarly type research on the Greenlaw's process, and then his peers and where all that came from. And then this particular work is coming out of chapter 7, and I'll show you the book here in just a second. So how do you make a calotype? You have to iodize the paper, and you'll figure out real quick that in the beginning chemistry is always with potassium iodide. Others, and even before Greenlaw, had figured out that adding potassium bromide had some real advantages. I'm not going to discuss, that. We'll get to that, later. I'm just telling you the kind of the overview right now. And that's the method I follow. I mix both potassium iodide, potassium bromide, and you got to have really clean, dishes. I do everything in glass, by the way, or stainless steel. For the ultra large format sizes, I use stainless, and I do have some large ceramic trays. You remember those, Michael, back in the day, where you could get the real large ceramic trays, right? So I got some of those, and the reason is so you can clean them. You really, really clean them, because any type of contamination, even tap water in this process, will drive you nuts.
So the plastic chemicals seem to adhere more to the plastic than obviously glass or the metal.
Yeah, it does. And the other side of it too is that they do make some really true flat bottom trays, which they don't make many, but they do. A lot of them have like X ridges, and they do the groove so you can kind of get your finger under there to pick up the paper. All that's disastrous for calotypes, because you're dealing with very, very thin paper, right? And it's just those things don't work. Plus the contamination component. And I've done it. I've tried it, and boy, does it not work. You definitely want glass or stainless or ceramic. So there's a little tip right there. After that, and I do the iodizing process in large batches. So if you mix up the solution and you filter it, because you'll get paper pulp and whatever in there, as long as you keep filtering it in that and you have enough to cover the paper, it's a full immersion that you do. That will last indefinitely. I put it in the cabinet away from light, and I filter it before I use it. And I do, like I say, big batches, because I primarily work in 5x7, whole plate, 8x10, and 14x17. I do have everything needed to do 8x20 calotypes. I just haven't done it yet, but I will definitely kind of see that maybe next spring on some landscapes or whatever. But so you can work in batches, and that's exactly what I do, right?
And you're storing that in glass jars?
I am. Yeah, everything's in glass. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, everything's in glass. And you can go to like Amazon and get like 1, 2, 3 liter, 1 gallon, half gallon, whatever measurement system you want to use. And like glass milk jugs, even like the glass mason jars or whatever. If you're going to use the metal with the metal tops, make sure you put like a plastic baggie between the lid and the glass, right?
Oh, saran wrap.
Yeah, saran wrap's a good option too. You just want to keep that metal away from it, but always in glass. And then the sensitizer is silver nitrate. Greenlaw was really, I think, I've done this research. I'd have to look at the notes, but I think he had the highest concentration, which is 6.3%. There are a few others that were in the 5% range. And then glacial acidic acid, which modifies the pH and also acts as a restrainer and will kind of balance out the desire for fogging. So if you think about what's happening here, we've got potassium iodide, which is a halide or a salt, right? Now you've got silver nitrate, and you've got a restrainer in here. And now what do you have? You have the ability to have a light sensitive medium, right? And so if that hits UV light, you're absolutely going to get exposed. I will just tell you that like the next step is exposure. What I find is I work with all like authentic 19th century glass for my calotypes. There are some things like I'm doing with like the Graflex 5x7, which I love that camera. Love doing calotypes with that. I've got a whole bunch I'm getting ready to do actually this coming week, where that's got like a probably like a 1930s, 1920s, like a 210 millimeter on the 5x7, like it's like a Jenna Tessar. So I think that probably would have been made in like somewhere between the 20s and 40s, depending on what copy you have. So, but this glass isn't UV coated, and modern glass, it can be used, but it's going to be different, right? You're blocking UV, so you have to think about that. They didn't have anything with UV coatings back in the day, right?
Right.
And this is a UV sensitive process. So if you're using modern coated UV glass, it's not that it won't work, because I have tested that. It's just you might experience longer or different exposures, right? So there's that to think about. So after you do the exposure, like I'm using, like I said, a vintage glass, typically f3 or f4.5 were like the more common apertures that you would have found, in the 19th century, as opposed to like 2.8 and f4 and stuff today. If it's bright sun, and this process absolutely loves, you can go out high noon, bright sun, and you'll make the best calotypes of your life. You go out where you normally think, and which is what I did in the beginning, by the way. Oh, I got to get this soft light in the morning and stuff. Oh my God. Yeah, the exposure times are outrageous, right? And think about it. It's all about that UV. So the more UV you have, in that spectrum, the better it's going to work. And you're just going to get magical images from 10 to 2 that you would never do as a film photographer, digital photographer, any other photographer, basically. So yeah, you can just make some amazing images. Those exposure times can be as little as 30 seconds, for like an EV14 type range, or cloudy days. And I've actually made calotypes in the rain because I wanted to see if I could do it. Right. I mean, whatever. The exposure was 15 minutes. That was just my guess based off of what I was kind of seeing. And we'll get into that when we get into the actual workflow part. But it worked. Was it lower contrast? Yes. Was it a great image? Absolutely. So it just, there's so many variables there, but you can work in a wide range of conditions. So you get that done, you come back in, and you use gallic acid. Gallic acid has been a developer for a long time, certainly introduced in the 19th century from a natural resource that's made in the world. So that's a beautiful thing. And then you're going to add some glacial acidic acid. You know why? It's, same reasons you would add it in the sensitizer, right? And then you're going to add what I call a helper solution of some additional silver nitrate and glacial acidic acid, again, to act as a restrainer and modify the pH. And what you'll have is that dance between the gallic acid and the additive helper solution. You're going to build the kind of density you want. And that's really, I think, the art. If the most difficult part of this process, I think, is you have to gain the experience. No one can tell you. I can tell you that there's potholes ahead. I can describe them to you, and I can try and guide you around the pothole, but you're going to hit the pothole anyway, because our experiences are different. And you're going to figure out very quickly that helper solution is absolutely the key to making really good calotypes. And it's variable, and it's intuitive, and you got to keep really good notes. And so, like, I've made, I don't know, hundreds of these things, and it's a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of just cycles to even get to the point of making these things. And so when you start cutting those calotypes in half and developing them, you already know you don't have a usable negative. And boy, that's a real gut check because you realize that you're just gaining information, but you do realize that if you can see past that you're going to get to a place where you can make incredible paper negatives but you need that history experience, right? So then fixing, as you know, in the original front side in 1840, 1841, Fox Talbot wasn't clued in to Herschel's hypo sodium thiosulfate trick yet. He was using various like salt solutions, like he did in like the photograms and stuff like that, and then iodine solutions and stuff. None of that was permanent. It kind of slowed it down a bit, but there are some original stuff that just continues to just print out, if you will, in like George Eastman House and some of the museums and other places like that. They have to store them in dark places, and they're viewed underneath very controlled conditions and that. But Herschel fixed all this for us in 1841, fixed, no pun intended, with sodium thiosulfate. And everybody got on board with that, to include Fox Talbot. So there really wouldn't have been a Fox Talbot calotype without Herschel. Now, there's no way to really know if Fox Talbot would have figured that out without Herschel, but I don't know. It's kind of doubtful based on, all the research and stuff like that. It maybe would have been another generation, or somebody else could have taken, but because Fox Talbot was so tight and literally so non-inclusive on all of his notes around the calotype, that those notes, if it hadn't been patented and ultimately got in the world, might have just died with him. That's probably my personal best guess based on what I understand about kind of how all that went down. And then there are some variations of workflow where they do a pre-wax if you want like an incredibly sharp negative, like would rival film type sharpness. Then you can get that if you match a paper source that doesn't have distractive elements in the fibers of the paper along with the pre-waxing. And I have seen some of those, and they are quite sharp. I don't go that direction. I follow Greenlaw's idea, and others, by the way, that I wax after the fact, and they really come to life. And it not only really makes them come to life and print easier. I typically print either salt or platinum or palladium or Calotypes or something like that with my Calotype paper negatives. But you do have those options to where, depending on what you need. So that's kind of the process. And this little chart right here kind of tells the story where 1841, where Fox Talbot did the original British patent, all the way through all the players that got all the way down to Greenlaw in 1869. Now, you'll learn today that that's when it appeared in the historic literature and the photographic news. However, Greenlaw was actually using his process in 1855 in India, in the desert, in 105, 110, 115 degree Fahrenheit heat to make calotypes. It wasn't until the almost end of his life. He actually died in 1870. And he documented this kind of on the way out the door type of thing. I don't think at the time that he documented that because of his cause of death, which we'll talk about in a minute, I don't think he knew that was his kind of his swan song there. And there were other versions of that appeared like in other literature, like 1870s. There was even some accounts of Greenlaw in the 1890s and even at the turn of the century too. But and I've looked at all that literature, the 1869 version with the photographic news that's the one you want, right? And I'll put links to all this stuff. So this kind of sets things up here. So let me get this out of the way. And can you see that okay, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay. You think we're big enough? Do I need to go any bigger?
That's good right there.
That's pretty good. Okay. So the book, and I did this phonetic pronunciation. If somebody said Vijayanagara to you, you'd be like, what'd you just say? Like, what? How do you pronounce that? Right. And so that's the ancient city. And so this is the pronunciation, Vijayanagar. It's like ya, like yard, na, ga, like gutter, and ra, like run, right? And so that's how you pronounce that. And a lot of people that I've encountered kind of have a little trouble with that. And then you kind of get a little better over time with it. But for this presentation and to make it a little more understandable, it is acceptable, as I note here in the notes, to refer to this as Hampi. And that's really just the capital city of, there's my little mantra calibration reminder there. The capital city of this ancient society, right? It was an empire. And so the book, I put this right here. So the Al-Kazi collection, there's a whole story that we will, I think, get to in the next episode. That's a private collection. And ultimately, Greenlaw's original calotypes are now part of that private collection. And it's a whole sordid drama story of how that all went down. So that's exciting to learn about that or whatever. Right. So Splendor and Ruins, and it was edited by Dr. George Mitchell. And he is an academic. He is a trained architect, and he spent decades in the field of academia around ancient societies and architecture. He's quite a fascinating man. And I've got a couple links that you can actually, he did a YouTube video a few years back, which I think is pretty much at the end of his career, just by way of age, where he actually talks and shows and tells the story behind his story of how he became involved. And we'll unravel all that as we move forward. So anyway, this is the book. And we're going to look at chapter 7 in this book and dig into it, because there's some real gold here. And all I've done here is I've taken the text out of the book, and I've kind of highlighted some things that we'll talk about here. And obviously I can't reproduce this because I don't have copyright to do that, but I can talk about it. And I do strongly encourage you that if you are interested in this, because the plates alone, the photographs of the original prints, the original calotypes, it's worth the money. And you can buy them on the used market, $30-$40 type thing, right? So you're not talking about a great deal of money by any means. So I'd really encourage you to do that, because I think you'll get a lot out of it. So Sophie Gordon wrote this chapter, and she did a great job of setting up the story and the timeline of like kind of what happened, and set up the story of photography. And that's what we're going to talk about here in the first sections. Now, I summarized it, but in these first sections of the book, where she goes into all the way up until we get into Greenlaw, I've just really summarized that down to this little paragraph here. But there again, if you got the book, you can read all that. We just don't have time to do that in a show like this, right?
Right.
So prior to photography, there were artists, there were people. Colin McKenzie, she calls out, James Morant were others, where they were watercolorists, they were sketchers, they were painters or whatever, right? And they were drawing and documenting. Really, that was what they did, right? Sketches and watercolors, so on and so forth. And I'm actually in the process right now of chasing down some of those original sketches and watercolors, because I'm just interested in them, right? By Colin McKenzie and James Morant in particular, that Sophie calls out. And so that's what happened. That's what they were doing. And then we're going to dig into the story here that prior to 1850, now remember, Fox Talbot patented in 1841. He had an iron legal patent around the process. He only licensed it to a few people, and these were people in his circle. And you got to remember, Fox Talbot was a very wealthy man. He literally lived in a castle, and that should not take away of how brilliant this man was, by the way, because he was much more than a photographer. And we'll get into that later when we kind of move through some of the calotype stuff and get into the salt prints and things like that. Make no mistake, this guy may have been a legal bird dog on suing anything and everybody that even looked at his calotype. Make no mistake, that guy was brilliant, and he's just a fascinating figure for sure. So because of his approach, it's just amazing that there were people, just 9 years after the invention, with such a tight grip control over the process, over in foreign lands, in this case, southern India and the desert, photographing ancient societies from the 12 and 1300s. And so it's like, okay, you've got my attention. I'm paying attention. I'm interested. I'm intrigued, right? Like, how did this all happen, right? And so we've seen this shift, as Sophie Gordon notes here, that there was a move from the hand-drawn records towards photography, right? And they used it as a tool and as an instrument from an archaeological documentation standpoint. And it even started bending into, and she hints at this idea around the artistic preferences. And then, of course, it only went on from there. So that's what I want you to take away from here, is that from 1850 and earlier, it was really about sketches and watercolors and things like that. And then, as photography became accessible through the Calotype paper negative process, and remember, just in a few short years, 1855, we had wet plate collodion or whatever. So when we get into Greenlaw, this was her section on Greenlaw. This is quite interesting. And this is that video that I was telling you about here. And once again, this will be available for download. You can go watch this video by Dr. George Mitchell that I was telling you about. And it's like an hour and 15 minutes long, but it's a fascinating watch, and you'll learn a lot of anecdotal stuff there. And I learned that the V&A Museum in the UK had made in 1910, because none of Greenlaw's, you'll find out here in a minute, none of Greenlaw's prints survived, only his calotypes. And there's some clues of why his prints, meaning his salt prints, they would have been printing salt at this point. And we know from the timeline and evolution from salt to albumin that albumin wasn't even an option at this given moment, but they were soon thereafter. And there are a lot of albumin prints. And just as an anecdotal side note, albumin prints were the longest running, most prolific type of print in the 19th century. And in a way, that's a little bit sad to me, because just the inherent problems. And I'm actually writing an article on the blog right now at the timlaytonfineart.com blog around all the inherent problems and issues with all these 19th century processes, which includes salt, albumin. I even look at platinum and palladium, carbon, all the ones that you would cyanotype to. All of them are flawed in some way. They just have different timelines and different methodology because of the makeup. Most obviously here, silver being the most vulnerable, where you've got an inert precious metal like platinum, or you've got something like carbon. It's going to deteriorate and have different criteria around the way in which it's going to deteriorate. So tying this back to the albumin side of things here, egg whites are going to yellow over time as an organic binder, and there's just like no stopping it, right? And so some of the best photographs in the world and future generations will just be like gone, right, at some point, because of the reasons that we know that we kind of talked about there. So anyway, I encourage you to look at that. We're going to look at some of these remake of these prints here in a minute. I've got this up on another screen. I'll bring it in here in a minute. But this is where I wanted to kind of start the story here. So the history of photography of Hampy kind of really started with Greenlaw, because we know now that he was the first photographer to create any work, much less a serious body of work, that was published or created. So it's the first photographic record of Hampi from that ancient society. And so it's fascinating. And now I know at the time he probably, I'm just speculating here based on everything that I understand about all of this, that he was in love. He was amazed at the architecture. He was in awe of it. And we know that from various notes that he's written, and we'll review some of that. So I could see why he would be drawn in here. And he, at this time, you got to understand that, as Sophie notes here, I mean, this is relatively an unexplored area, right? So this is a period of, you're talking multiple centuries where like there was not much activity happening. There certainly wasn't much by any like military expeditions and things like that. And that's why they were in that general area. And that's why Greenlaw was there in proximity and so on and so forth, right? So during his tenure there, during his travel, he produced over 100 Calotype paper negatives of the region. And we have through the collection that I talked about earlier, I think 65 of them are there. And and that was done right in the middle of 1855 and 1856, right? And so remember that, wet plate was the bomb at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And so, why did Greenlaw choose the Calotype? Well, we'll peel that back here in a minute, right? But we know that Greenlaw was a very active participant in the photographic community. He exhibited multiple times. He submitted work. So we know all this from a factual standpoint, right? And there's some surprises coming your way here in a minute. So we know that he joined the East India Company in 1835. He was later assigned to the 46th Madras Native Infantry, and he had a very long career, all the way to his death in the military. So he was a military man his pretty much his entire adult life. He was born in 1818. He died in 1870, and that makes him 52. And we'll talk about why he died here in a few minutes or whatever. So it's quite fascinating. So he followed his regiment that he was assigned to in South India around, and it turns out that I had no idea until I read this that he was a highly effective linguist. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know. And he was the official interpreter to the corps where he was assigned there, right? And then and right before he got into his deep photography experience in 1851, he was promoted to captain. He was working for the revenue board and so on and so forth. He ultimately continued on as what they called at the time the paymaster. And then later in his career, post the Hampi photography or whatever, he was transferred to another district and so on and so forth, right? Now, we know that Greenlaw died in India. He actually, right after that period where he photographed the ancient city of the Calotypes, he was transferred. He then took a sabbatical back to England for apparently 3 years. And then he comes back to India. That's when he produced the 1869 article. And then he soon thereafter dies. And he dies from an infection that was framed as a, you might even know about this, Michael, with your medical background. Hold on a minute. I'll grab let me grab the actual cause of death here real quick. It was, I think, something to do with the tissue. Let me see. I've got it in my other notes down here. Yeah, inflammation of cellular tissue. And what that means is he didn't have antibiotics and he had an infection and he died.
Yeah. Probably septicemia.
Yeah. So how the infection occurred by way of a cut or whatever it might have been, there's no record of that, but that's what we know about that, right? All right. So let's get into some of the photography stuff, right? So his first appearance as a photographer was in the Journal of the Photographic Society of Bombay in 55. Remember, we know because we've done the research that he was photographing in 55 and 56 of the ancient city, right? So he actually sent a group of prints to the Society of Bombay for judgment. And I love this line. Look at this. Your society asks for prints and processes. Mine, I fear, are so inferior that I'm too bashful to send them. I will wait till I hear from you regarding those sent. Wow. Well, we know that he's a humble fella, right? I mean, he had no idea. I mean, what I think, I mean, that's great, ain't it, Michael?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I love humble people. And one of the things that here we are 175, 180 years later, little did he understand that he was doing ultra large format calotypes in the desert heat with making the chemistry he had available to him, the water supply, just everything was against him, right? And I can tell you in 2024, making a 14 by 17 calotype with the absolute purest, with the absolute best chemistry, with 180 years of history under my feet and standing on the shoulders of all these other people, it's still remarkably difficult. I mean, it's like, that's why I think I appreciate him so deeply, is I can't imagine, and he's fine tuning the chemistry to deal with his heat conditions. And that's where the spirit of camphor comes in. And we'll get into that later. But I just really want that to sink into people, that this guy was so humble, and he had no idea that he was the shit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was the man. I would have loved to have met him and just spent time with him or whatever. That's just amazing. So some more surprises are coming here, right? So after he had sent that, they were displayed on the 7th of August, 1855, as only landscape and architectural views by Greenlaw are known to have survived, and that's his work of Hampy, right? It's very interesting that this work that he sent were portraits.
Oh,
I know. Isn't that a cool surprise? Right?
yeah.
It's like he was doing portrait work of the natives in that area at the time. None of those survived, by the way.
That's sad.
I know. Not a single example. Right? And we're going to dig into some of this of why here in a minute, right? The prints were described as 6 views of Bellary, a ruined Hindu temple with elaborate sculpture, 6 groups of 6 from 6 to 12 in a group, including children, 6 portraits of adults. The verdict was given. These were all very perfect and elicited much praise, proposed by Dr. Buis, secondary by Mr. Hutchison, and carried that the society's thanks to be communicated to Captain Greenlaw for his very liberal offer, and that his promised gift of photographs would be very acceptable and thankfully received. Right? I just love how they talked. Then it's just so elegant, so poetic, right?
Yes.
So the same year, Greenlaw, he exhibited a number of other portraits in the Madras exhibition of raw products, and he won a second-class medal at this time for his portrait work, right? And I think this is the turning point for me once I discovered this, when we actually get to the point and we're going to look at some of his landscapes. I can see how he's treating his architecture and landscapes of the landscape like portraits. It really just made things work for me. Like, I could see it as a well-seasoned photographer. It's like I totally could get it, right? So it states here, the reports from the exhibition, that Captain Greenlaw exhibits a great variety of head-size portraits, half-lengths, and groups, many of which have been carefully focused and exhibit the half-tints and delicate shades, which give the rotundity to the figures, but several have been spoiled. What? By being left too long in the hyposulfite solution. The attitudes, however, are good and proportions artistic. That's our first clue of why none of his stuff made it. And I will tell you anecdotally, I found a bunch of other research that this was very common at this period of time. That, and you got to realize the conditions. I mean, I don't know if they're collecting rainwater. I don't know if they're getting like water from the river. I don't know where you get water. Maybe they're breaking open cactuses or something. I don't know, but it's the washing protocol was the kiss of death, not only for him, but others in the area, right?
It may well have been that he had very limited water available.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it wasn't done or not done enough.
Yeah. And here's another clue that he wasn't just photographing with calotypes. Look at this. Some of the groups contain from 8 to 11 figures, meaning people, well arranged through, although not all in focus. Greenlaw exhibits a very good, clear, positive on glass, an ambrotype, right? With delicate half tints and well-focused features, but the dress and background are a little flat. The jury recommended a second-class medal for Captain Greenlaw's groups, right? So now we've got him doing calotypes. We know that he's having problems washing his salt prints. Because timeline, he was making salt prints. That's a fact, right? So we know he wasn't doing anything else. And he's making ambrotypes. So 2 years later, in 57, he again submitted more work to the jury of Madras, right? And they said it was enthusiastically received and compared favorably with Tripe. Now, Tripe was like the commissioned guy. He was the guy. And we can't get into all that research right now, but I've researched him, and he was the anointed golden photographer. So the views of Captain Trite exceed in finish and delicacy, but those of Captain Greenlaw with both boldness, freedom, and effect. The former are perhaps the best photographs, but latter are the best pictures. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like as Sophie mentions here, it's impossible to know precisely exactly what was exhibited here, but from the resounding approval given by the juror for his photographs, we can certainly see that this applied to his Hampy series, right? And just the fact that his work was being considered to Tripe, that would be like an 8x10 large format silver gelatin contact printer being mentioned in context with Adams and Weston. Yeah, that would be the same thing. Understand the levity of what we're talking about here. It's just amazing, right? So the juror goes on further and seems to imply that although Greenlaw's prints may be a little rough around the edges, we know why, because he didn't wash them well, his artistic vision was the superior one. So Mr. Tripe was, the commission guy and had access to the best of the best. But here we got Mr. Amateur Greenlaw coming in his spare time, kind of blowing him out of the water as it relates to the aesthetic and emotional and artistic value. So I would love to have seen some of those portraits.
Yeah.
Would have seen it. So several of the negatives certainly evidence an artistic eye at work, displaying the originality in both subject matter and composition. So look at this. This is one of his, here's a photo of one of his negatives. Look at that.
Wow.
Right? And this is actually in the collection of the Alkazi collection that I mentioned earlier that was behind producing the book. If they didn't have his negatives, we wouldn't have that book and we wouldn't have this. I'm actually in communication with the foundation right now to get digital images of all of Greenlaw's. And you'll also find out here in a later episode, Dr. Taylor, that we'll talk about in a little bit, which I believe influenced Greenlaw. So they have a lot of his calotypes too of ancient Greece. So it's just fascinating stuff. But so when you say these babies are bulletproof, look at that. They were not joking. Look at that. That's just wow. And, because all we ever see are simulated prints or positive. To actually see a picture of his real negative is just like, wow. And I look at the color and tone of that, Michael, and you've seen a lot of my calotypes,
Yeah.
and they don't look like that, right? They don't look like it. Now I can make them that dense, but the coloring, that gold and whatever color, I don't know if that's an age or a time thing or what, but I certainly understand the chemistry. I understand silver. I understand the impact of silver as it relates to light, color, and temperature. Um, uh, Other variables like the actual fixer used, the temperature of the fixer, all these things impact the color. Now I can get chocolate brown, I can get reddish tone, but this yellowish tone, and I do know from other research that Greenlaw actually painted some kind of material onto his negatives, some of them, like in the sky areas and stuff like that. So quite fascinating, and that's another reason to get the book too. Is not all 65 of those are in there, but a lot of them are. And then whenever I, hopefully, fingers crossed, do get access to all the digital images of his calotypes, we'll do another show and just review all the calotypes as well. And I think that would be fun to do.
Yeah.
So, and that's Greenlaw fills the frame with the monstrous half lion, half man creature. That's what we were just looking at here, right? The position of the camera at an angle slightly lower than that of the statue, giving the impression that it's the Nirishima is towering above. It heightens the effect by creating a feeling of insignificance in the viewer. So Greenlaw understood composition. He understood that he was trying to communicate this idea. And so think about this. You're in 1855, you're in the desert, you've been in the military your whole life. You have had some exposure because of your status in the military to getting some access. And remember, a lot of these journals and stuff that were published during the time, they didn't even start until the 1850s, right? And so all the ones that we hear about now, that like all these ancient photographic societies and stuff, they didn't even start. They weren't even rolling. And so how did he know? It was intuitive to him. It's very clear to me. Very, very, very clear to me that he did have some influence. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So like Sophie states here, this composition works exceptionally well as a negative. As a reversal of light and dark areas, the composition means that dark areas, we know how negatives and positive works, right? I think it's much less, like she said, emanating when you look at the print. This is, Michael, like we have talked recently a fair amount about, like I'm starting to display more of my calotypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, just to kind of give you a sense here, let me pull over something here on the screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the V&A Museum that made remakes of his negatives in 1910. And these are all mostly albumin prints, I believe. But we'll just pick one of these. Let's just see. I don't think they have that particular one. They have it, but it's a matter of, do they have it on display for review here? Let me just look a little more. It'd be really neat to just to have that, direct comparison. If you see it, holler. But I think I've got a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
I think I've looked at it. Okay.
Yeah, those are all structures.
All right. So let's try to get something close. And this is another one that I love, by the way, of his. I've seen the negative of this. Look at that cart. I mean, come on. And look at the people here, Michael.
Yeah.
Look at the structure. This is from the 12 and 1300s. And here he is. And this is Greenlaw's handwriting down here, by the way. Right. So fascinating. So this is the print. So when you look at this, right, I mean, it's neat. It's absolutely neat. And you can see even the problems kind of happening here. See look at this down here. Look at the watermark and stuff in the, and this came from the original negative. This is Greenlaw's handwriting down here.
Okay.
And they took a lot. He would take his ultra large format negatives and he would trim them down. That's how he would crop.
Oh,
Yeah, isn't that fun? He would just cut them into whatever size and wax them. Another side fact about the waxing that I found out from some additional information directly from Greenlaw's own words, when he was working there for extended periods of time, instead of like waxing whatever he made up, he would wax the whole group of calotypes as one block and carry that brick of the beeswaxed negatives at one block, and then take them back and then remelt them and then go from there. Pretty fascinating, huh?
yeah.
But anyway, look at this, and then look at that. I'd rather look at that. But you, the calotype, it's just so rich, so cool. So anyway, that was one of the turning points for me. We'd never got a chance to kind of talk about this, that was kind of one of the turning points. Now, I did have a couple other here. I'll bring this up. Look at this.
Ooh.
This is inside. Look at the people laying down here.
Oh.
People here, right? And look at the fragility, the edges of the negative here. Look at this. See? You could see look at the holder. You can see pieces here from the edges from the holder. See? All here.
That one guy in the back almost looks like a positive.
Yeah, I know. That is so, it almost looks like a mummy. You see this?
Yeah, that's what because you got the guy in the bottom sleeping or resting.
Look at this. I just blew that up. Look at
Yeah.
this. That looks like a Martian or like a mummy.
So I wonder if they've got a turban on.
Yeah, 100%. Because that was in India at that time. That's exactly how they would have been dressed. And then this was just another one that I had access to here. Look at this.
Yeah.
And the fact that he included the natives, in the images. And I do have one. I don't have a digital rendition. I have it on hard copy in a book. Greenlaw did one self-portrait of himself in the architecture there at Hampi. It's super cool. It's super cool. So anyway, you can kind of see here how fascinating this is, right? And it's like, man, I would much rather look at those calotypes than at the salt or the albumin prints, right? All right, so to date, no evidence has surfaced suggesting that Greenlaw, through his series, was fulfilling a commission for any institution or government department. That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, right?
Right.
And so rather than the breadth of Greenlaw's coverage and the length of time over which it completed suggests the opposite, meaning that the monument was carried out in official capacity, meaning his work, right? No, it wasn't official. This was an amateur that kept returning over and over and over and over to the same place. And he drew out all these different studies. It was a comprehensive body of work, right? And now the conditions that he was under, all of the situation is just fascinating, right? There's a book here. She mentions this cactus. It was phenomenal. You'd have to have the book to look at that. That's another reason to get the book. She does mention like the figures in the book and that. But what I wanted to call your attention to real quick is this, Michael, I had mentioned this Dr. John Murray to you earlier, right? And I want to kind of set the context here. So Greenlaw's work begins at the time to recall the compositions of John Beasley Green, who was working in Egypt in the early 1850s. Greenlaw's apparent single-mindedness in covering one site so completely is only comparable to the work of Dr. John Murray, however, who repeatedly photographed the Taj Mahal. And I've seen his calotype of Taj Mahal. Breathtaking, by the way, just absolutely breathtaking. He did this over a period of many years. And Murray, who also worked with large calotypes, and what he's referring to there, those are ultra large format sizes, made hundreds of these calotype paper negatives depicting the Islamic tomb from all the angles, as well as comprehensively, meaning Taj Mahal, surveying the smaller tombs, mosques, and pavilions that were situated in its vicinity. I did a little, this stuff in yellow is my own research, and you'll get access to all this, by the way. I'll give you this document. But Dr. John Murray's Calotype photographs of Taj Mahal from the 1850s are preserved in several esteemed places like the Met, Cleveland Museum of Art, even the Al-Khazi collection that has Greenlaws. They have many of the Calotypes or whatever. And Dr. Murray was a distinguished medical, he's actually a surgeon and leader in the fight against cholera, best known for his superb paper negative photographs of India. Oh yeah, you go look at his work and you'd be like, oh yeah, he definitely knew what was going on. And this, what we're setting the stage for here is, this is someone that Greenlaw had access to and looked up to, and he was emulating to a degree. This is conjecture to a degree, but there is evidence that because of his statute and position within the military, the people he had access to, the information they consumed, you know, all these variables, the scholars have figured out that kind of what was going on there and what Greenlaw had access to, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff here that you can read in this document later. It's quite fascinating. This is just research that I did on him, and you could do a complete bender, just so you know, that just literally go off the rails on Dr. John Murray, and yet to never return to anywhere again, because it's just like, it's just fascinating. I'm going to open this up for you real quick. Look at Murray's Calotype.
Wow.
Wow is right. That is something else, isn't it?
It is.
Now, would you rather look at that or a salt print of that? I mean, come on, it ain't even fair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll get you another one here. Pulling it up. This is the back view of the rest of the house. Look at this here. So here we've got the Calotype, and then we got the print. Please give me the Calotype. I'll just take that very much. Thank you very much. It's just amazing, right?
Yeah. You make a great argument for just showing the negative.
Yeah, and it's all what people want or whatever. But, you know, for me, I mean, look at that Calotype. I mean, come on. I mean, this guy did hundreds of large format, ultra large format Calotypes all around the Taj Mahal there.
And he's got people or kids in that picture there.
Yeah, right here. See this?
Yeah.
Do you see? And that's planned. You see this right here? This is before Greenlaw. Okay. Do you see this little one here? And you got one here.
Yeah.
Did you see the people setting in Greenlaws? Now it's starting to make sense, right?
Yeah. The composition's just gorgeous.
Isn't that something? Yeah. There's something, and that he's putting the human element in there. And then Greenlaw knew that, and he took that into his work. And so we're seeing that connection of the dots, right? Connection of the dots. And you know what's really kind of fascinating about this is, anybody that knows me knows that I am not a portrait photographer. Could I be? Absolutely. I treat my floral still life as portraits. I believe I could be an incredible portrait photographer. Zero interest in it for me personally, because of just the finicky nature of people. I don't have patience for it. And, that's just being brutally honest, right? You know what your shortcomings are. I have no patience for shenanigans around doing portrait work. No, zero. I can't do it. If I would starve to death if that's what I had to do to make a living, right? Type of thing. However, what's interesting about this self-observation is the introduction of the human form and shape as it particularly is rendered in calotypes, is something I never really embraced or thought of until this work, Michael. And now you've seen Dr. Murray's calotypes. You've seen, there's many more to look at for Greenlaw or whatever, but you're starting to see this idea, right, of the people in the architecture, in the compositions. It's fascinating. Me personally, I would have never got there, but I could see very artfully placing humans in various forms in future state images to bring out a different metaphor in my work that I would have never considered without having been this close to this research. I think that's cool, right?
Yeah, very.
Yeah, super neat. All right, so as we plow through this, Greenlaw left behind no comment on his photographic work, meaning period, right? But he did write a series of lectures which he delivered to the Freemasons while he was stationed in Burma in the early 1860s. Remember, he died in 1870, right? So these lectures were published post his death in 1870, explore the complicated symbolisms in Freemasonry, concentrating particularly on the metaphorical use of light and darkness. So Greenlaw understood, and he got it. You can see by his calotypes and stuff else that he understood what was happening and got it. And I can see that in his own words, here as I've gone through this. So, and then Sophie kind of mentions here, it's maybe it's wishful thinking to find this direct link between the metaphors and Greenlaw's photographs, meaning the calotypes. But there are fleeting passages that might suggest his attitude towards the temples and palaces. And there's an example of that where he was deeply impressed and moved by what he encountered. In Greenlaw's own words, if we turn our eyes to India, China, Egypt, and Greece, we shall find everywhere traces of genius and skill of the highest antiquity, which excite our astonishment and prove beyond a doubt that how proud soever we may be of our progress in all arts and sciences, we were equaled and in some instance surpassed by those primitive nations. I mean, do you want to hang out with this guy or what? I mean, come on. I mean, I want to be Greenlaw's descendant at this point. I mean, this guy is just the way he talks, the elegant nature, it's just fascinating. We need more Greenlaws in the world, right? For sure. So Greenlaw's language still betrays his colonial mentality through his reference to primitive nations. He also makes a few remarks about the temples, in which both marvels at the architectural achievements, but wonders how this early civilization could have created them. And I have experienced that myself. I live in the Ozarks. It's in the southern part of Missouri, right before the Arkansas border, in the Ozark Mountain area that was very mountainous billions of years ago, but now would be considered like, really cranky hills compared to like the Rockies, which were smaller, by the way, at one point in time. But the mills and the old grist mills, and that's always a source of fascination from an architecture for me. Michael, I've photographed them so much, and I look at the intricate work, the engineering, and the things that that happened, in the 1800s, and I'm just like marveled. So I totally relate what he's saying here. In this case, it's even a more magnificent example of very early civilizations building things that blow and defy logic, right? Your mind, you can't imagine, right? So he goes through this, and that's kind of the end of this piece here, or whatever. As the anonymous juror recognized in 57, Greenlaw's photographs are certainly some of the best pictures to emerge in response to effectively Hampy. And as we see, looking at the work of later photographers, Greenlaw's search at the site was at least one level aesthetically driven. And so let's go look at some of his prints real quick. And what I love about this is when professional academics and researchers write pieces, all the references are there. And so we can go back and get access to these sources. Some people won't have access to this. Based on my academic background, I can get access to these sources, but some people won't be able to do that or whatever. So let's go look at a couple of these, and I'll go ahead and close these out here. And I think that's really the place to start here. So we won't spend too much longer here. This here, the Bellary, this here, the Garuda Temple. This is one that we looked at here, the bigger view. This just fascinates me. I look at this here. It's like, what is going on here? What's going on with the wheels? It's like, and look at these creatures here, Michael. You see them?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got somebody standing underneath these ancient creatures here. There's so much going on here that you could take apart. And even in 1850, you can see how this is being overtaken here. You got trees growing out of the structure, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's been around. That was there, 500 years when Greenlaw got there, right?
It had been abandoned for a while too then.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I personally am not aesthetically like turned on by these prints or whatever. I want to see the calotypes, and you can see a lot of them in the book, but letting that bias go for a moment. I mean, look at the size. No wonder he was just just amazed, right? Yeah. You're just thinking about, how did these people in the 12 and 1300s build this? How? We're sitting here in 2024. I cannot get my pea brain wrapped around that.
And how long it took to build that. You just look at some of the churches built, back in the 12th, 13th century. They took 50, 100 years to build. And
yeah, for sure.
These are just as intricate, if not more. And that tree is probably 15, 20 feet tall.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That building is, structures.
Yeah, that's got to be 25, 30 feet at least.
Yeah.
The sheer size of that. You can see notes here. I won't go into any of this right now, but you'll have this link, and everybody on the show here, I'll give you links to all this stuff. But you can see here, place of origin, Hampi. This was printed in Great Britain. Colonel Alexander Greenlaw was a photographer, was a calotype. And then they talk here more about sometimes, what's going on here, right? And then more of the object details, print. And what's interesting here is this particular one, and they give you the sizes here. So this can give you a clue, like some of those calotypes were trimmed, but
I was wondering about that, what the sizes were. And like you said, that Greenway trimmed his negatives. I was wondering, that must have been a common practice. So what size were they normally shooting back then? Was it something along
12 by 18, 16 by 18, and later 16 by 20? So that's what he was shooting. And he routinely, I can't go into it now because of time constraints, but he routinely trimmed his 12 by 18s to 11 by 14. And if we do the math here, this is, I'm doing some math. You might have to help me. I can't do this on play. That's pretty close to 11 by 14.
Yeah.
Because you divide that by what, 25?
Right. By 25.
Yeah. So, I could pull up a calculator. We could do it here, but
I think you're right.
But anyway, and it doesn't really matter at the moment. But in the next episode, we do get into his sizes and formats. And then we see the next episode will be episode 3. And episode 4, we actually see in Greenlaw's own words the actual camera formats that he was using. And we also we'll discover in the next episode where he got his cameras. They were special built by somebody in back home in England that that were building out of teak wood and other woods, because the cameras that he was using there was literally warping and breaking from the heat and the conditions. And yeah, look at the site. Look at this. I mean, look at this. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, wow, look at the size of this. I mean, how do they get, like, look at the detail, the intricate nature of that, right? And there again, we're seeing that Murray influence on him with including the natives here, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, look at this stuff. This is almost gone here. And if they didn't have Greenlaw's calotypes from this period, a lot of this is gone now, or collapsed down into rubble.
Right.
It's like so many clues. And look at what's going on up here. Look at this. It's like, I don't know. I feel so dumb sometimes. You know, I just think here we are, you know, doing all these things in life, and then you've got stuff like this going on in the 12 and 1300s. And now let's see what's going on here. This looks interesting. Oh, look at this. This is interesting here. This may have been, this is speculation on my part, this might have been, like this one, established 1336. Wow. Named after the capital, empire, right? And then in 1565, the city was sacked by armies. Wow. You know, it's like, you can see how you can just get off on a bender here, and it's like a never ending, you know, piece. There's the people. So when you start looking at these, when you start doing the research, I guess what I'm hopefully doing for viewers here, and I'm doing it for myself, and I think you're seeing, connecting the dots here, Michael, the importance of influence and importance of access. That's why I'm such an advocate of giving you the information so you can go do things that are meaningful for you. Maybe it's historic, maybe it's artful, maybe it's whatever. But I can tell you, this Calotype process is so damn hard. It's so damn difficult that unless there's just a handful of people, with myself just being one of them, that are really alive and working and has a commanding knowledge of being able to do this. Now, there are some guys in the, like in Europe and stuff, but they're getting older and they're not even producing any work. And I think one that comes to mind is like, you know, whenever Quinn was doing his live shows and he mentioned Martin Becca. If you research Martin Becca and his 16 by 20 calotypes that he's done, now he was using the pre-waxing process, the Pellegrin variant of the workflow, which we'll get into that later, what all that infers and means. But, you know, he's older now. He's not producing any work, I don't think, on calotypes. But his 16 by 20, his work of in Dubai, some of the most fascinating calotypes I've seen that would, to me, be sort of like in this idea of, he took the polar opposite. He took an ancient process like the Calotype and took the most modern thing that you could, architecture you could possibly find on the planet in Dubai, and those two worlds collided. And how that rendered in the Calotype was, there's one in particular of Martin Becca's work that is just absolutely astounding to me. I don't know if I could, this is just on the fly here. I think.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that is a thought that I had of doing, taking an old technique and applying it to very modern structures.
That is exactly, that's why I want you to see the Martin Becca stuff. Let's see if this even would get us. Well, this is Transmutations. This is the body of work that I'm talking about right here. And I'm going about it in a side way, but this is not the one I want to show you. This kind of gives you an idea, right? But this isn't the one. Well, let's see here. We're going to find this. We'll do this real quick because I'm going to do this. See if this gets us closer.
He's not that old.
Yeah.
He's a
1935.
year younger than me.
Well, no, you weren't born in 36, my friend.
Oh, I thought I said 56.
No.
Oh, okay. Yes, he's
Yeah.
older then. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. He's getting on. He's the age of like my mom.
that's
I don't know why. I've gone through this before of his website. It's like it's so ridiculous to find, and it is such a beautiful. I'll find it here. It's worth spinning the cycles here of. You would think if you typed in Martin Becca Dubai that you would, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe let me try this. Let me try that. That was like a established. Now, this isn't his actual work. I know what his site looks like. This is the actual print right here. This is the one that I love so much, but that's not. Let's keep going here.
There's a martin-becca.com. Have you tried that?
That's got to be it.
Because I just pulled that one up.
It's just too obvious, right?
Yeah.
It's like why that wouldn't have. Yeah, that's a site.
Yeah. I just pulled up to Dubai.
Yeah, transmutations. Here it is right here. And these are all calotypes, by the way.
Yeah.
And his process. You can find a few things of him on YouTube where he's doing that. This is the one that gets me right here. Look at that.
Yeah.
Come on. Now, I would pay good money to have that. I would invest in that artwork right there. Yeah, it's just amazing to me. And if you look at the whole, and one of the nice things is, yeah, you got to understand another language here, but you can see down here, 16 by 20 Legray process, right?
Yeah.
You can make that out. So you're not going to, if you don't speak French, good luck. But the nice thing is you can just go to like GPT and do it, or Google Translate or something like that, right? And you can, actually, I can just, no, I don't want to go to Latin. I know a thing or two about Latin. Okay, here we go. Dubai, a city almost, oh, there it didn't quite emerge very quickly from the sand, the desert. Joining. To try and answer, I wanted to show the city, the architecture, and the urban planning in their raw state. And my photographic proposal seeks to disorient the viewer, and he does that.
Yeah.
With a deliberate arrangement of a collapse time, and that's probably just like a translation issue, right? From French to English, but I get the essence of what he's saying. That leads to the observer to look at the present in my photographs as if we were already looking at it from a distant future. That's what you're talking about. That's why I went to the trouble of showing you this. Is your idea and what he has done. I think you can learn some things from looking at Becca's work, and it might be right down your alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, might be, but yeah, we could get off on vendors here and just go forever on this stuff. Yeah. But as you know, it's so fun. So I will take and close out on this episode here. Michael, thank you for participating. I always enjoy talking to you. I enjoy your friendship, of course. But I know that you have a passion for this stuff like I do. I'm excited to continue to terrorize you with the idea of doing calotypes, right? I'm going to get you there. I know it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. And then, of course, the invitation always stands. We'll get together in person and
Yes.
do some of this stuff. And we'll start you off with whatever, and you don't need to bring any. I got extra 8x10s and stuff here, so you don't need to bring anything, by the way, from a gear standpoint or whatever. But I think we'll just start you off like on 8x10, get you proficient there, or even 5x7 or 4x5 is fine too, and then progress up to the bigger sizes after you'll see what I mean when you get into it. So yeah, I think you'll definitely enjoy it. But we'll close out for this episode here today. I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen. I'll go back to, let's see, I'll stop the screen share and I'll bring this back over. Okay, so here we are. We'll close this out and then I'll get with you again in the near future. I've already got 95% of the research done on the next episode. So I'll get this recorded, packaged up, and out the door and let other people enjoy it and hopefully learn from it as well. And then we'll take and get some time together. We can work on our schedules, whenever it makes sense to get together for the next episode. And then I'm really like frothing to get that next episode because it's just, we whet the appetite today, right?
Yeah.
Kind of giving you some context and a lot. So let me ask you this. Do you look at Greenlaw differently after this 90 minutes today that we've spent together?
Oh, yeah. Having more information about him as a person.
Yeah.
And yeah, anytime you have more information, I think it changes your perspective on things and gives you, more things to ponder. And so
pretty neat.
Especially be interesting to read more on the talk that he had given. And that's probably the most unfortunate thing so far that I've learned about Greenlaw is that we have his images, but we don't have his thoughts. And that, like as you said, he seems to be an extremely interesting man that you would love to sit down and have dinner with or over a few drinks and just pick his mind and hear him talk about things.
Yeah, he's a fascinating fella. I will personally send you the link for the book so you don't have to do that. I got to go jump and do something else right now. But that way you'll get it. But in the show notes and stuff, that'll be there for other people. Really encourage you to do that. There is one other book too that I'm researching, actually produced by the Al-Khazi collection, which is also it's about the early India architecture from 1850 to I think 1910, and Greenlaw and Murray are 3/4 of that book, by the way. And I just stumbled onto that, and I don't even physically have that book yet. It'll be here relatively soon. I had to buy it on the used market, and I'm excited about that. And then I'm waiting on a response from the foundation directly, about the next steps of the digital images. I'm starting with Greenlaw, and then I'm going to ask for Murray's next, but I don't want to make it too big of an ask up front.
Yeah. Right? Well, Murray was another interesting find for me today in his works.
Yeah.
That image that I believe it was his that you showed that of the landscape. It was the first time that I'd seen a sky that wasn't blank. Was that, did they alter that?
Yeah, he was actually painting some kind of material. They're calling it like gouache, like they would in painting, onto, and they figured out, by the way, different colors of the gouache or whatever you want to call it would render different results, right? Yeah. And so it's quite fascinating. Yeah. So for me too, that Dr. Murray was quite a fascinating, and I would say I'm only 20% of where I want to be on Murray, of understanding So that was the serendipitous gold nugget find for me well, I would summarize them. I'd say, just in general, the background of knowing more, the history of non-photography entering into the photography era in India, and then, transitioning from the watercolor and the charcoals into photography, and then the portraits work, by Greenlaw that's such a travesty that we only have words from
Yeah.
your exhibitions around that work. No, zero, nothing left there. That would have been fascinating. But I can imagine, and then I'm going to go back to the, like the book. I keep it in my backpack with me full time. Anytime I get any spare minutes, I'm in that book. I'm just reading it, enjoying the calotypes, looking at them critically, finding new things that I didn't find the last time I looked, and then now with being able to add that second book from the foundation when it gets here, that's going to be super cool to see that. And then hopefully we're going to get all those digital images. But even if we don't, between those two books, we've got a lot of the digital photographs of the original calotypes in the proper tone and color.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what you miss so much. I don't want to see that damn salt print from that. I do not. I want to see his calotype. Right. Yeah. That's the juice.
Yeah. You make a great argument for just showing them as the final image.
Well, and it's really, I'll just say this in closing. It has really changed how I'm approaching my calotypes, because I have written about 3/4 of an article. I'm getting ready to publish it maybe in a week or so. And I'm going to do some shorter little video clips of pointing out the variables of, if you're going at this with the direct intention of displaying the calotype, you're going to need to change up your density. You're going to need to change up and control, not necessarily change up, that's unfair. I would say control the color and tonality of the calotype based on the narrative and creative intent of your work. So now, at this stage of the game, I can go from a neutral black and white calotype. I know exactly what I need to do to produce that, to this chocolate brown cake, I call it, right? Just rich, deep chocolate cake, to a reddish, yellowish variant of that. I can produce all three of those right now. And the only thing that changes is my workflow. And depending on what the intentions are with that particular body of work or that project, I might want them more neutral. I might want them more chocolatey brown. I might want them more yellowish, kind of yellow, whatever. Yeah. Imagine emulating the idea of a sunset with a calotype with a direct display of that as the final artwork. And you control the workflow to where the sky, instead of it being this blank white slate, it's yellow.
Yeah.
Not a bad yellow, not a deteriorated yellow, right? Not a oxidation sulfiding yellow. But no, this is like legit, just the tone of the hue, that of it, and it's this deep, rich, reddish brown with the. So you can see how this is a world within itself, right?
Yeah. Well, to take that further, something that you've already started working on, and I can see doing something along these lines, is now that we're approaching winter, you have these skeletons of trees.
Yes.
And so if you take that, so now you've got the dark tree and the white background, and now you can make whatever color you want.
Yeah.
And I think that just really fascinates me.
Yeah, and it be native chemistry. You're not tinting, you're not applying handwork afterwards. This is
Right.
You're manipulating this on a chemistry level, to a degree, right? And so it's really just fascinating. And I've got that whole project lined up just on lone trees, and I've been waiting. I did some last year. I've got about 20 calotypes from that work. I wasn't quite tuned into the idea at that point last year of displaying them. I was all about making actually calotypes at that point. And I was kind of avoiding salt prints at that stage of my evolution as well. But the other thing you could do with that too, and I do have some cyanotypes that I'm doctoring with different acids, like gallic acid and other stuff like that, that will push that into like greens and browns and yellows and stuff like that. And it would be no less permanent than any other silver-based print that would be adequately processed, washed, toned, and waxed. Right? You'd want to wax that. That's still going to last a couple hundred years before it's any significant sulfiding or deterioration that would occur, particularly if it's in a stable, humid environment, inside of a whatever, particularly in a book would be nice, and inside of a indoors, and it's not left in a storage locker. It's like my greatest laugh at myself is I spend all this time doing this, which brings me great joy, but somewhere along the line, they're going to end up at a yard sale in a shoebox, and it's okay. I had fun. This version of my being, whatever this is, I had the time of my life making these things, and somebody else can use them as coasters or toilet paper or whatever they want later. So,
or you could be the next Vivian Myers if someone finds this after you're dead, just like Van Gogh.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Like, oh, hey, this guy was something after all.
After maybe a couple hundred years later, they'll figure it out. Hey, I see a couple blank spots on your wall back there. We got to get a calotype up on that wall.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we got to. Well, I'm going to work on these landscapes this winter, and if I get one that has that color and tone that I think is really just, and I'm ridiculously critical, right? If I get one that's cat's meow, I'm going to send it to you. And then
okay. Well, thank you.
And then you can mount it and frame it however you want or whatever. And I think we'll get you some diversity up on that wall there.
Yeah, I need some newer stuff though. So yeah, those are all 8x10s. I need to get some 14x17s up. And
oh yeah, no, that's great. They're beautiful. I can see the gist of what's going on here. But the calotype stuff as the displayed artwork would just be something radically different.
Yeah.
Than what, and I've got a binder full of this stuff. I don't even have any of my stuff mounted yet either. I mean, I think I'm still in that journey of exploring and creating, and I'm not really in that presentation mode yet. Although I do have some wall hangers in there. I know I do, but at the same time, I'm just not in that mindset yet. So, but all right. Well, I'll wrap it up. I get to my next thing I got to do here. Good connecting with you today. I'm really happy we're doing these things. I'll get this packaged up. We'll get it out there, and then I'll watch it back later too. I'm sure you'll probably watch it back at a later time as well. But anyway, well, good connecting, and stay in touch, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, it's a great way to start the day. So,
all right. Well, we're going to do it again. We're going to go deep on with Mike Ware's version of deep on chemistry. So that's going to be juicy.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to all of them, but the Mike Ware one should be really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think what it is good. I will just tell you that he really connects the dots pretty well to some of the other players on that game board of the Calotype Evolution game board that we look at. He does a really good job of connecting the dots there. But where I think I go even further than Ware did, because it wasn't like the vibe of that particular. It's chapter 8 in that book, by the way. So you'll have it when you get the book. But he didn't go deep like I go deep on the chemistry and number one, explain it, and also show you how to, as a practitioner, manipulate it to have different outcomes. He doesn't do that, but it's still pretty fantastic in context of what it is, because it explains that work. And Greenlaw, and he connects a lot of the dots of his influences and stuff too. So yeah, he's quite a scholarly fella. So and a very reliable, credible source, so that we can rely on that information. So I think it'll really help. It's going to take your story to the next level for sure. So anyway, well, have a good one. Have a good rest of your day, and hope you're well. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Tim. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
All right.